garden. I'm Jamie Maciek with the Nicolet Federated Library System here in Green Bay. This is our final webinar of 2016. What a crazy and quick year it has been. Really excited you all tuned in today. Our schedule for spring will be coming out in a few weeks, so you can let me know, or you can contact me if you want access to that. We're always happy to have a lot of people tune in to our webinars. So today we have Leah Liebergen from the Brown County Library talking about growing an edible garden at their library. And this garden has been in the works for a few years. This is one of Leah's main things that she does at the library. So she's going to talk about where it started, why they decided to do this, improvements that they've made, where they're going with it. And I think it's a great presentation for any of you who might be considering doing something like this at your library. So Leah, whenever you are ready.
Okay. Yeah, let's get started. My name is Leah, like Jamie said, and today we're going to be talking about the edible garden that's located at the Central Library, which is a downtown location for the Brown County Library System. And so I just want to welcome everyone to our library, or to our library and our garden, with a video that we created to kind of give an overview. This is a video that we show when we are going out to the community and doing outreach about the garden. And then we would also show this to maybe possible donors in the future to show them what the garden is and how we use the garden to supplement the programming that we have here at the library. This is a video that we created in Animoto. And it was, if you're not familiar with Animoto, it's a pretty easy free service to create videos to tell a story. And the story that we wanted to tell here is how our garden is used by everyone, from the staff to the people that come through.
Leah, just so you know, if there is sound, we can't hear it, but that's okay, because I think we're still getting the idea. We're still seeing the images.
Yes. Yeah, there's a bouncy little song that goes with it, but I wasn't sure if everyone wanted to hear the song, how loud it would come through. So you're welcome to, after the presentation, if you want to go through and see the video again with the bouncy little song. One part of the Animoto program, with it being free, is you only get a short list of songs to choose from. But it works for this video. So you're seeing lots of pictures of how we are using the garden, more than just, I think, people expect it just to be vegetables and harvesting and everything. We use it, like you're seeing inside here, to demonstrate how seeds are spread. We invite speakers to come in and talk about the importance of vegetables in their culture. We usually try to have a taste testing element to any of the programming that we have, because we want to make kids understand that vegetables aren't these scary, icky things that their mom and dad serve them or that they get at lunch, that they're fun and they taste good and they're good for you. That was our first kohlrabi that we grew, and it was the first kohlrabi I'd ever seen, so that was kind of exciting for me. We also tried to have something that the kids can take home with them, too, as part of the experience, an arts and craft project, or in the case of the salsa or our vegetable pizza, they got to take home some salsa or some vegetables with them also. And we obviously couldn't maintain the garden without the help of the community around us, from the master gardeners that help us to the donors that actually gave us the money to keep the garden, well, to build the garden in the first place and then keep it going. And then we have volunteer groups that come through to help maintain the garden. We also partner with other organizations like Live 54218 in the community and the Botanical Garden on nutrition programs because, again, we want to make sure that kids understand how important vegetables are as part of a regular part of their diet. The St. Norbert College kids really did a good job as far as cleaning up the garden. And then we have volunteers that come on a regular basis, and these are volunteers that come weekly. Some of them show up every day, especially our master garden leader, John, to make sure that the garden runs. This is a huge part of my job, but even though it's a huge part of my job, I still need help doing it. It's not something that even with the amount of time that I put into it, it's not something that I could do on my own without the help of our volunteers. So just to go over what we're going to cover today, we'll cover why did we plant the garden in the first place. A lot of people are surprised that we have a garden, and especially surprised since we are, like I said, a downtown location. You don't expect to see a thriving garden in the middle of your city. So we'll talk about that. How did we pay for it? I know that that's always a big concern with any library project, is where does the funding come from, not only to get it going, but to maintain it. Who keeps our garden growing? Like I said, we'll talk about the volunteers and the support that we get from our community. And then finally, we'll talk about how does our garden supplement the library programming that we do, because that's the mission of the garden, is to supplement the programming that we have here at the library. Just a little bit about me. That's me dressed up as Granny Sunbutter for one of our events that we'll talk about later. I'm a library services associate in the customer service department at the Brown County Library at the central location. I've been with Brown County for about 2 years. I've been in libraries total from academic or public school libraries about 16 years. The garden is about 50% of my job, and I'm full-time here. It's about 50% of my job from May to September, and like I said, that's even with the help I get. In addition to overseeing the garden, I do, reader's advisory, help with computers, teach internet classes. That's what I do the rest of the year. But from May to September, I am either out in the garden or organizing a program or planting seeds, getting my hands dirty out there about 50% of the time. I say, a lifelong gardener, kind of. I started gardening when I was a small child. My grandfather had a farm, and part of it was devoted just to a vegetable garden that my dad and I would maintain. And I had a love-hate relationship with gardens growing up. I remember hauling buckets of water down to keep the vegetables watered in long, hot summers. Now that I am overseeing the children's edible garden here at the library, I've come to love gardening again. It's to see the kids really enjoy the space and their parents appreciate being able to take their kids here. It's really, gardening has won me over again, so I'm glad about that. And I consider myself very lucky to be able to do this. So why did we plant a garden in the first place? Why would a library have a garden outside of it? Well, if you have never been to the Brown County Library Central location, we are located amongst buildings and parking lots right in the center of Green Bay. And when our building was built, where the garden is now used to just be a concrete patio. And it was the main entrance side of the library. It had benches on it and some trees, but it wasn't really landscaped or well kept. People would hang out there, and because it had limited sight lines for staff in the building, people would smoke out there, garbage would collect, And it really wasn't the warm, welcoming entrance to our flagship library that we wanted to have. So people put their heads together and thought, what could we do to improve this? And so we brought in the heavy equipment and started digging and dug up all the dying landscape that was out there and dug up all the cement and began to make changes and really cleared the area so that we could have a blank slate for our garden. The trees were also taken out, which I will talk about as one of the challenges because Green Bay is a tree city, and it's always hard to see a tree go away, but they were looked at by an arborist, and it was determined that because of their age and their condition, that it was okay to clear them out. And because we were replacing it with a garden, that kind of mitigated some of those concerns. This is the initial garden plan that the committee, the library committee, came up with. And the goal of the committee was to transform the area into a hands-on educational opportunity for children. The focus would be on food literacy, also supplementing the literacy goals of the children's department. It really was or is to be an outdoor classroom that supported the library's mission and focused programming for the children's department. So things that were placed or planned for the garden would really work in partnership with things that would be happening in the children's department. So this isn't, some gardens outside of libraries are general gardens for anyone. This one was specifically meant to be a child-friendly, things at a child's level, fun and welcoming for kids. As you can see, changes were made then once the committee started working with landscape architects and planners that looked at the space and came up with a plan that was workable for the space that we had and also was fun and exciting and inviting for kids. So you'll see there's lots of planters on here, and there's perennials, there's annuals, there's fruit trees. This is the plan that is the, or was the ideal for what the ideal garden would look like. After this was put together, then donations were sought, grants were applied for, and because of the funding that came in and because of limitations in time, not everything that was in this final plan actually came to fruition at the first opening of the garden. Now, some things have been added since then, and the garden, like any garden, is a work in progress. We will continually change it and have it grow and add things as we go because we want to keep it exciting and fun for kids. So this was the final workable plan that the landscape architects worked with. And this is what the garden looks like from the roof of our library. So if you compare the two side by side, like I said, not everything in that plan was there at the vine cutting ceremony. We have since added a few things like the shed and a couple of arbors, but not everything has happened for various reasons. We opened the garden June 13th, 2014 with a vine cutting, and you'll see pictures of that soon. The cost for everything as you see it there was about $79,200, and that included the demolition of the space, removing all the concrete and trees, bringing in clean fill because we needed to make sure that we were having the best soil to grow things in. There's also areas of mulch in there to keep the moisture in the soil. So in order to have the best growing environment, we have that also. So all of that included was about $80,000 if you round up. And then, like I said, not everything in that final plan was there, and we will continue to add things. As far as getting down into the garden, our first raised garden beds were purchased through the Green Bay Garden Blitz. The Green Bay Garden Blitz is an organization that helps new and continuing gardeners by selling these raised beds, and then they fill them with really, really good soil, and they deliver them to your home and put them together, and then they also provide you with a garden mentor that helps you through your first year of gardening. So it just seemed like a perfect community partnership to partner with the Green Bay Garden Blitz on our first official garden beds. We painted them to kind of make them pop a little bit more in the garden. Normally they're just the plain wood. And then they filled it, and honestly, these two beds grow the most vibrant and most productive vegetables because the soil is so good. So we always have real good success. And if you're not familiar with the Green Bay Garden Blitz or a similar organization in your community, I would seek something like that out. They are an awesome group to work with. We also, just by kismet, we're building the garden at exactly the same time that one of the main streets by our central location was getting renovated and fixed up, and they dug up a culvert and they were putting new pipes in, I guess. And the city workers saw that we were building a garden and saw these giant pieces of culvert and said, hey, would you like these to be planters in your garden? So we received 4 giant cement planters for our garden thanks to the city, because they just didn't need them anymore under the road, and rather than send them to a landfill somewhere or do something else with them, they gave them to us. And honestly, these are really good planters because of the depth that we can plant things. In the bottom photo you see, those are potatoes, which the potatoes that we grew in there were amazing. So we are really still grateful to the city for thinking of us and donating these planters to us. In another partnership that we had, there was a Boy Scout that was working on his Eagle Scout badge. And he decided to help us out by making these tire planters, which I guess is quite a job. I've never attempted to make one, but to turn a tire inside out is not an easy task. And then he painted them with our library logo colors. So those are always fun, and we always plant flowers in those because of the tire, the rubber leaching into the soil. We don't want to plant anything that would be consumed in these, but they look so good, and when we fill them with flowers, they look even better. So they are a real fun part of the library, and having the flowers there attracts pollinators, which helps with our garden too. This same Eagle Scout planted the bushes and hedges that are in front of the garden fence, between the garden fence and the sidewalk. So he did a lot of work for us. And then some other garden beds that we have. These rotate just because we want to keep the garden fresh every year, and because you shouldn't plant the same thing in the same place all the time, unless it's a perennial, like our lamb's ear in the bottom right corner, the touch garden bed. But 1 year our salsa garden might be salsa, it might be a pizza bed. This past year we grew green beans in it and cucumbers, so we like to rotate. But this is just a sample of the things that we've grown there. We always try to do like a fairy and gnome program every year, so we have one of our garden beds dedicated to being like a fairy garden, which is fun for the kids because that is one of our most successful programs every year, and I'll talk about that in a bit. And then we worked with the Oneida Nation and planted a Three Sisters garden bed with corn, beans, and squash, which allowed us to really get into the history of those vegetables, the importance of them being planted together, And that was a really fun program too. And then we also have an area dedicated to, we call it our butterfly garden, and we plant things in this corner of the garden that would attract pollinators. We have milkweed there, and we have, the dill comes up on its own every year, and as much as we try to control it, we haven't figured out a way to totally control it yet, but that's fine because everyone loves dill. But anyway, in this corner of the garden, we really try to plant things, butterfly bush, that would attract pollinators because we need them. And being in an urban setting, we don't have fields of flowers around us to attract those pollinators, so we're trying to draw them in on our own. This is our original compost pile, kind of sad looking. We actually now, because of a donation from one of our master gardeners, have 2 compost bins, and they're the ones that you put the compost in and then you can spin them. If we wanted to wait until we found a bin that would turn and spin like that, but didn't have outside gears because we didn't want little kids' fingers to get caught in them. So we did our due diligence and our research to find the best compost bins. In the meantime, we composted just in a regular pile, which allowed us the opportunity to teach kids about composting too, which is important to a garden. Some of the challenges that we met when they were planning the garden is, like I said before, the trees. It's always sad to take trees down, but we mitigated that through the fact that we were putting a garden in and an evaluation of the trees. Another objection that actually is continuing and is a continuing discussion is because the goal of and the mission of the garden is to be an outdoor classroom, it isn't open all of the time that the library is open. Again, because of the poor sight lines from where the staff are in the library to that area, we don't want to plant this beautiful garden and then have people hanging out in it again like they used to do, and it's filling with trash or people sleeping out there or anything. We want to keep it this real good educational opportunity for kids. And so we do have a fence around it, and we do keep it locked unless we're using it or unless there is a volunteer out there or someone working in the garden, because we want to keep it a clean and a nice space for kids and families and follow the mission of the garden. So the big question, how did we pay for it? So they figured out, it was going to cost $80,000 to do this, and like most libraries, we didn't have $80,000 just laying around to plant a garden. Well, word got out that we were going to do this on the news, and Cellcom, which is a big company in our area, reached out to us after they saw the news story and made a donation to us that put them in the position to be the named donor. So officially, the garden is known as the Cellcom Children's Edible Garden. We also applied for grants and looked for partnerships in other areas with major corporations in this area, with Prevea, Festival, PMI, and Schreiber. The Schreiber Community Grants Fund actually helped us get a garden shed out there this year, which is wonderful because otherwise we were hauling our tools and wheelbarrows and everything in and out of the building all the time so that it wouldn't stay out in the garden and get caught in the rain and rust and everything. So having the garden shed has been a big benefit to us. So a lot of work was done in writing the grant applications and finding these partnerships, but the work that's done in finding these pays off 5, 10, 100-fold in seeing the benefits that we get from that money and the fun and the joy that the kids have out in it. We used to have a donation box here at Central that the donations would go specifically to the garden, and that was when the garden was just getting started. We don't have that anymore, but people at any time can donate to the library and specify that it is for the garden, and people do that. So we do receive unsolicited donations because the garden is such a focal feature to our entrance that it kind of speaks for itself. And people who believe in sustainability and believe in food literacy and food security really have stepped up to the plate on that. Right now, because of the money that we have, we are fiscally sound. So much of what we do out there is donated. The seeds, the tools. When we tell our garden story to people in the area, they love the idea of it, they love the practice of it, and they are more than willing to help us maintain that. So that is one of the most rewarding parts of this job, is seeing people really step forward and help us continue with this. We don't have a lot of expenses then because so much of it is donated. I would say the most expenses that we have in maintaining this garden is buying all the craft supplies for the various programs that we have. And because we have money in reserve to cover those, we really haven't had to worry about it. Of course, that doesn't take into account staff time. That's budgeted completely separately. But as far as expenses, the major expenses would be any supplies that relate to the programming of it and not the actual running of it right now. So who keeps our garden growing? So we dug up the cement and we put some good soil down, but that only lasts you for so long, and then you need people to maintain that garden and keep it growing every year. We absolutely, positively could not have the garden or the programming that we do down here without the help of the master gardeners. They are amazing. And if you are thinking of doing a garden in your library or in your area, I would absolutely contact the extension office in your area. Find out who your master gardeners are and see if they can help you and partner with you. The depth of knowledge that they have, their willingness to dig in and get their hands dirty. We absolutely could not do this without them. And it is an amazing partnership, and I am in awe of the work that they do. I also mentioned that we received our first 2 garden boxes from the Green Bay Garden Blitz. They are, even though that was a one-time we received these boxes kind of thing, we are continually partnering with them on programming. We help each other out as far as recruiting volunteers, getting the message out there about each other's programs. So they are a big partner of ours, as well as the community garden program through UW Extension. There are community and neighborhood gardens throughout the Green Bay area that are run through UW Extension. And because of the work that they do and the partnerships that we have with those gardeners, we're able to continue on. And so we are, even though we're not officially a neighborhood garden, we are considered part of this community gardens program. And I am on the Brown County Community Gardens Committee. And so it's a group of people who get together and share information and share knowledge and bounce ideas off each other. And again, just a fabulous resource. So if you're thinking of putting a garden in your area, I would absolutely contact your extension office and see how you can develop a partnership, because I think without that, we really wouldn't be where we are today. Here are some of our master gardeners. The picture on the left-hand side is John, and he is the leader for the master gardeners. And so he is the one who goes out and recruits the other master gardeners to help us every year. And he kind of oversees their volunteer time, and he comes up with the plan of what we're going to plant where, and he is this garden, basically. He's standing right next to an arbor that he built on his own this year. It's a bean arbor. Those are pole beans growing off it, and the kids just loved it because they could watch the beans grow up and over the arbor. They could walk under these long beans, and that In the fall, as we got closer to like October, the beans started looking like long, witchy fingernails and stuff, which kind of like decorated the garden for Halloween all on its own. So that was kind of cool too. And it really opened up a chance to talk to kids about vegetables and beans, and it was just it's a real neat addition to our garden this year. So we're really grateful for that. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 3 women. Those are master gardeners standing behind a table. We have a table out from about, well, May, June, depending on how the spring is, until October, where we put out extra produce that we don't use from our garden program or anything that we just is extra. We put out on a table, and people can help themselves to it and take it home or have it as a snack here in the library with the cherry tomatoes. Kids love to do that. But people can help themselves to the fresh produce. We are in a part of the city where a large portion of the population is food insecure. And so this is our little part in helping those community members have some fresh produce. And it's a real nice thing that we get to do as part of our garden program. When the garden began, one of the first partners that we had was the Rotary Club. And they did a seed drive with their members, which netted us over 1,000 packs of seeds, which is amazing. And given the size and scope of our garden, we couldn't possibly plant. So that afforded us the opportunity to give seeds to kids and families to start their own gardens in their own backyards and spread the love of gardening beyond just the library walls. So this was an amazing partnership that allowed us really to kick off the garden in a real cool way. These are some of our other programming partners that we have. So we have the garden itself, and then we have programming that works with the garden or supports the garden. And these are community partners that have either come and presented or given us supplies, provided in-kind donations. And again, we could not do what we're doing without their help. We also work with a class at Sybil Hopp School here in, well, they're in De Pere, where we get a jump on the growing season because we are in Wisconsin and the growing season is very limited. So we use their greenhouse to start our seeds. This provides the students with a life lesson in gardening skills and gives us plants that are ready to go, and we can just transplant right from their greenhouse. So it's a great partnership. We love going over there. And we could not do what we're doing without the support of our staff. Like I said, this is about 50% of my job, and with the help of the volunteers that we have, we don't need to rely on our facilities staff as much as we did in the beginning, and that's why it's real important to me to develop a large group of volunteers every year, because the more volunteers I can get, the less our facilities staff has to work out there. And this past summer, we were able to secure enough volunteers that the facility staff actually didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to worry about watering. They didn't have to worry about picking up garbage. They didn't have to do anything out there. And they were super grateful. So how does our garden supplement our library programming? I was saying that the reason the garden is there is to work in conjunction with our library programming. So I have just put together slides of each of the 3 years of the garden programming, since the ribbon or the vine cutting was in the summer of 2014. And you can see this is our first year of garden programming. We didn't get a huge jump on the season because the construction wasn't done until June. And so we got in there very late to start the garden. So the programming was limited because of those constraints. This is the official vine cutting. And then I have information on these slides about different programs and books that we have used to supplement our programming. I have my contact information at the end of the presentation. If anybody would like further information on our recipe for seed bombs or our template for the plant life cycle spinner, please just let me know. I'd be happy to share that information and get that out to you. We always try to have activities that are in conjunction with the garden, even if we, like this one, we are dropping seeds, helicopter seed drops to show how seeds spread and how you can have seeds all over from one tree. They can go all over a neighborhood. Like I said, we usually have a program that starts inside with a story and then somehow involves a craft, a taste testing element of whatever is in season or is ready to pick at that time, and then time out in the garden for kids to explore, help themselves to a bag of vegetables to take home, depending on the time of the year. Painting with vegetables is always a hit, and you will see that as part of our programming every summer. It's really good for the fine motor skills development, and it's a fun thing that kids can take home. Another way for kids to interact with vegetables to show that they're not so scary. This is the big joke down here. The first year, because they got such a late start on planting, the one thing they did get in and they got a lot of was basil. That was the main crop of that first year. So basil went with everything and was handed out by the handful here. We had strawberry basil lemonade, we had caprese sandwiches, we had, yeah, everybody left with a bag of basil. If you came to check out books, you took home a bag of basil because we had so much of it. We also try to do scavenger hunts out there, so again, the kids are interacting with the garden. They're looking at vegetables in new ways. It also supplements the literacy component of our children's department. We try to focus also on some STEM stuff, like you'll see the exploding, or the oozing, I should say, not exploding, oozing pumpkins on the right-hand side. We always try to supplement as much as we can. And a lot of tactile and hands-on stuff, like building scarecrows. We just like to make the environment fun for the kids. So in 2015, that was my first year at the garden, and because we had more time to plan and more time to plant and start the seeds and everything, our programming calendar increased a bit. We always have our garden programs run on Fridays, and they end right as the Green Bay Public Schools summer lunch truck arrives. So so our garden program ends with the kids getting a free lunch, so that's nice. We always also try to cover composting as far as the kids that stay for the lunch program. If any of their lunch is compostable, we like to take that out to our compost pile. Fairy houses and gnome homes could be its own presentation and webinar. This program, we were not prepared for how popular this program was. I strongly suggest, if you are thinking of doing anything with gardens, that you somehow incorporate fairies and gnomes into them. Kids love them. Kids loved building the gnome homes and fairy homes for their little garden friends to find. It's always a successful program. Again, painting with the vegetables. Potatoes, we grew potatoes, and I would never have seen kids as happy as I saw when they were digging their potatoes out of the ground. It was amazing, and I'm so glad I got to see it. However, finding storybooks and programming around potatoes, a little harder, so this is what we came up with. Everyone could take a potato pal home. I mentioned the three sisters in the garden earlier. This was a really good partnership that we had with the Oneida Nation, and if you have a First Nations group in your area and you're thinking of having a garden, I would reach out to them about ways that you can do a Three Sisters garden, or work in partnership with them on vegetables and crops that are important to First Nations people, because it was a really good cultural experience. I learned a lot from it. It's just a real good experience. We had a butterfly program that was absolutely amazing. We released butterflies in our downstairs conference room for the kids to chase, collected them, and then brought them up to the garden and released them into our garden. A lot of them flew away into the city, but we're hoping some of them came back and made their homes in our garden. Again, an amazing program, super fun. And we handed out milkweed because butterfly populations are declining all across the United States. We handed out milkweed to kind of spread good habitat for butterflies so that they have good homes and food and everything, so that we can try to increase the butterfly population again. Like I said, we always start with a story inside the children's department and then move outside. For our garden art program, we talked about the Mary Knoll art environment down in Fox Point, and then went outside and created our own garden art that kids could take home to decorate their own gardens. Again, it's nice for the kids to have something that they can take home that's tangible. We had presentations from Live 54218. We always try to have nutrition programs, although I will add the caveat that the blurb that you write about your nutrition programs will determine how many people come. So you have to make it sound really fun and exciting, because nutrition on itself isn't the biggest draw. But yeah, but they do a really good job. So if you have a nutrition educator with the extension, the nutrition educator there, somebody to come in and talk about nutrition, and then have taste testing. Again, we want to make the vegetables seem less scary and more approachable. We also have just pools of dirt for kids to dig in because of the fine motor skills and because of supplementing all the different tactile needs of young children. Sometimes just digging in the dirt outside is fun enough for some of them. And speaking of digging in the dirt, we had an educator from the Barkhausen Wildlife Preserve come with buckets of dirt from Barkhausen, and we dug through it for bugs and worms and found pill bugs, and that's when we dug up our potatoes, and it was an amazing day of kids going home with bags of potatoes to have for dinner that night, and they could not have been more excited or more proud. Salsa, always a hit. We picked the tomatoes, peppers, onions, cilantro, fresh from the garden, chopped it up, put it in a bowl, and just ate it. And it was amazing, and the kids loved it. You don't have to get fancy. You can just do a pick and eat, and kids will love it. And they take more pride in it because they've done it themselves. They've done everything from the picking to the chopping to the stirring. It was a great program. Our Harvest Hullabaloo was our end of the season party that we had, and again, tried to have activities that provided for fine motor skills, hands-on, just had a lot of fun out there. We replaced the dirt with corn for fall. We got wagons from a local garden center and had our own little mini hay rides around the garden, just to get out there into the garden. Like I said, we have a table of freshly picked produce out and available for people just to take as they wish. That bottom right basket of tomatoes, those are all heirlooms, and I was especially proud of those because they were just so beautiful and so good. So this past summer was our busiest summer yet. We really packed it in with programming. A lot of the programming was similar to previous years, but just amped up a bit more. The one big thing we added this year was the Tuesday nights in the garden with a master gardener, where adults could come and ask questions of the Master Gardeners. And then we had specific educational programs for grown-ups that we utilized our Master Gardeners for an educational, because that was one thing that the Master Gardeners wanted, is they wanted not to just work in the garden, but to actually teach people a little bit more. So we utilized their knowledge and their skills in teaching, which was wonderful. Again, we always have our garden kickoff in line with our summer lunch kickoff. So the first Friday that the summer lunch truck shows up, that's when we kick off our garden activities. And sometimes exploring in the garden doesn't even have to be about the vegetables. It can be about exploring the dirt and the rocks with a magnifying glass. As long as kids are out there and they're exploring, that makes us happy. These are just some examples of other programs we've done. We have a makerspace on our 3rd floor, and they helped us with this one in creating the grass caterpillars. You just fill a nylon with dirt and grass seeds and then decorate it up like a caterpillar. And then as long as you keep it watered, grass will grow on it. So kids got to take that home with them. Again, having kids get their hands dirty and take something home, we love. The terrarium program was new this year. We received a donation of plants by Mayflower Greenhouse, which was amazing. Otherwise, that would have been an expensive program. But again, having kids take something home to tend to and watch grow only will help them want to garden in the future. Worms was a super popular program. Our Master Gardener has a compost box in her basement. So she brought that for the kids to explore and see how worms and vermiculture help make compost. And then we went outside and dug up worms. They could compare the size of a gummy worm to a regular worm. And it was a super fun program. Another new one this year was the 5 senses in the garden. The kids got to try edible flowers. I got to try edible flowers. I never did that before. That was pretty cool. We had a sensitive plant for the kids to touch. And then, like I said, we always have a taste testing element out there. Fairy Houses and Gnome Homes was back by popular demand. This is an amazing thing to watch the creativity that the kids have. So it's a fun program. The Grow Your Own Pizza impressed me with how many times kids would, I made just flattened out crescent rolls for the crust, and then kids could build their own pizzas, and kids were having like 3 and 4 slices of vegetable pizza, which I don't know on their own if they would do that. So that impressed me that they were eating the vegetables from our garden like that. This is our Pumpkin Land, which was our premier event this year, and I have a link to a video about it here. I'm not going to show it now, but you can watch it later. This was based on the game Candyland, except we turned our garden into Pumpkin Land. It was our first year, and we made that very clear that this was a learning experience for us, and we will only make it better in the future. But I think for our first year, we did pretty good out there. We literally made carpet squares look like squares on the Candyland board and had the kids work their way around, well, families too, work their way around the board and explore the garden and pick a vegetable, and it was really fun. It was a fun day. We grew the biggest pumpkin that we've ever grown so far and actually had a contest to guess the weight of it. And I will have you watch the video to find out how much it actually weighed. And then our makerspace up on 3rd floor carved it for us for Halloween with our logo. Because of a generous donation from a community member, we now have an art installation, a piece of art, sculpture in our garden. And it's supposed to look like a dandelion, and it is amazing. And if you ever get a chance to come visit our garden, I strongly encourage it. Just because the garden is amazing, but this piece of art is amazing too. I've included books that we've used in our programming because, like I said, we always start with a story inside and then move outside. So just to give you an idea of some of the books that we've used, and there's tons out there that would also work. But these are just an example of some of the ones that we've used to supplement our program. Wedgie Man is a very popular one that we use every year. One of our displays that we use to supplement our programming. Some of the garden activity sheets that we've used, scavenger hunts are real big, especially the color and the 5 senses ones, because those are kind of self-guided. So if we just want a self-guided activity out there, we can have those available. Brown County Grows is an extension of our garden. This is programming that's meant for grown-ups. So our garden is called the Children's Edible Garden. But adults were asking, well, do you have anything for us to learn about gardening or to do anything with gardening? So we started a series of events and programs called Brown County Grows. And so those are specifically aimed at grown-ups to come and learn about not just gardens, but anything sustainable, backyard chickens, beekeeping. And we will start a new series of that in the spring. We always have fun with our vegetables. If you're in Green Bay, you have to grow green and gold peppers. I mean, that's just, you have to. And then we post these on Facebook just to have fun with our garden. Ongoing challenges, there's always those. Finding the funding for the future. The garden is on the south-facing side of the building, which means in the summer it is hotter than the surface of the sun sometimes. So tomatoes grow amazing there. Other delicate things, not so much. So we have some problems with herbs and stuff sometimes. We just have to keep that in mind when we're picking seeds. Recruiting and scheduling volunteers. Anyone who works with volunteers knows once you have the volunteers, you're not done with your work. You have to continue training them and following up with them. And then the usual garden pests. This was a particularly bad year. We not only had our typical rabbits and squirrels, but we had a groundhog that set up residence in our garden and really got fat off of our vegetables. So, yeah. We have a new garden intern, and she will be helping with our garden and nutrition events. And then this is me. So if you want to ask me any questions, if you want any information, if you want copies of anything, please let me know. I love to evangelize about this garden. I love this garden so much, and I am lucky to be here. And I would love to share any information that we have, that I can get a hold of for you. So please contact me. That's a cauliflower we grew in our garden, and it is as big as my head, and we were proud of
it. That's awesome. Leah, would you go back to the slide, the previous slide, so people can get your information, yep. Just so they have that? Awesome.
Absolutely.
Great. So we do have a few minutes for questions. If you do have a question for Leah that you would like to ask right now while she's here, go ahead and type that in your question box. And as I mentioned, like I said, she has a lot of great photos and great resources. The slides will be posted on our website as well if you weren't able to ferociously write down all those names of the great books that she posted. One of the questions came from Rachel, and she asks, have you ever planted a native plant garden to teach children about native wildflower species? Because many native species are great pollinators also.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We haven't specifically done that yet, but that is on our list of things we want to do. We actually, one of our staff members' husbands is an educator in native plants, and so we're planning on having him in and then guide us for next summer and dedicating part of our garden for the native plants that can be perennials and can attract pollinators. Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. And Anne just recommended a book about potatoes called Two Old Potatoes and Me from 2003, oh. And I did just post that in the in the chat area. So yeah, it looks like it's by John Coy. Yes, thank you, Anne.
Yes.
So Leah, do you have somebody? And maybe I missed this. Someone just in charge of the volunteers, or are you still coordinating a lot of that?
No, that's me. Yep.
That's you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have? So then do you have a core group who come every week who kind of do the same thing?
Yeah.
To maintain the garden?
Yes. What we learned this year worked best is rather than having somebody come, like I'm going to always come on Tuesdays, because that's hard in the summer because you want to take vacations and
Right.
something might come up on a Tuesday, is the volunteers would be responsible for a specific week in the summer. And that was what they were responsible for. So they were responsible for everything that happened that week. So watering if it didn't rain, a program if there was a program that week, coming to the Tuesday nights in the garden and answering questions. And that was their week to be here and be a part of it. And then if they wanted to help out with other things, they could, but that was only supplementary to their 1 week. And that seemed to work the best, because then they weren't tied to the garden all summer and it didn't feel like a burden. They did their week and then they could help out as needed. Yeah.
Awesome. I think that works out with almost any volunteer program, because like you said, things happen, people take vacation, people are gone, but if you can commit people to just a time frame, I think that's a lot easier. How many volunteers do you have total?
Let's see, we had 5 master gardeners, and then we had 3 extra volunteers on top of that, which almost gets us through the summer, but a couple of the master gardeners had to take 2 weeks.
Okay, awesome. Jennifer asks, can you explain how you integrate the building fairy gnome houses program with the outdoor garden space?
Yes, okay, so that's a little bit of a stretch. One of the children's librarians and myself have a strong affinity to gnomes, and we have the fairy garden outside in the garden. So the fairy garden is it's like really teeny tiny plants and plants that are mentioned in fairy tales, so like beanstalks and things like that. So it's a loose affiliation to our garden. We do a presentation, and I'm happy to send our presentation out. We do a presentation after Jessica reads the story on wee folk, and we talk about fairies, gnomes, trolls, and other wee folk, and how they live in gardens, and how the fairies help take care of your garden when you're not looking, and live in flowers and all that kind of stuff. And so then we have the kids build their own fairy house or gnome home for their special friend, wee folk friend, to live in at their house. So kind of, because fairy gardens are kind of a big thing. It's not necessarily nutritious vegetables and stuff like that. It's more for show and fun. So it's a loose affiliation, but it's one of our more popular programs, so we kind of can't get rid of it.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, we are just out of time, so I want to thank you, Leah, for the great presentation. It's clear you enjoy what you do and have a huge passion for this, and that definitely shows, and I think it's a great addition to your library and in our community that we live in. I want to thank all of you for participating today, for your great questions and your attentiveness. And as I mentioned, this is our last webinar of 2016. We will start up again in 2017, starting with the Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. Registration is open on that website. We hope to see a lot of you at that. So thank you again, Leah. Thanks to all of you. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and happy holidays as well. Thank you.